Okay, please, can I have your attention? We're finally going to get started, hopefully. So if you all would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. It's nice to see such a good turnout for such an important discussion. And at this point, can you hear it all right? At this point, I'd like to introduce Tim Mayhew, CPRC Chairman, and consultant Nan Stolzenberg, and they're going to take the meeting from here. And I would like, and I emphasize I would like, to end the meeting at around 7 o'clock. So we're going to try to get through this and answer as many questions as we can. So that from that, I'll turn it over to Tim and Nan. Yeah.
So it does. This is pretty good. Okay. First of all, happy September 1st to everybody. It's been the better part of a year since this journey began. This town board created a charter for us and asked us to consider the comprehensive plan and the notion of hospitality, we began quite a journey, but the beginning of that journey started with asking to get an amazing set of advisors. And as you may recall, we did a request for quote. We went out to a lot of different advisors and went in and interviewed 3 sets and ended up choosing Nan. Nan was busy, and so we had to beg her, quite frankly, to come on board. We chose Nan because she put together a group, sort of a multidisciplinary group that included specialists in mapping and economic analysis. We also hired a lawyer to help us think about all things legal. Blissfully, that lawyer was essentially solely focused on this document as opposed to defending us or any of the like. There were times, quite frankly, we were a bit worried about that. And he ended up being quite helpful. The journey on the committee, we were very clear even before Nan that our journey was meant to listen to this community and to seek as much input as we could possibly get, and to not come forth with our own opinions, but actually to solicit the mood and sentiment of the community itself, and then accurately reflect that as opposed to what our own ego or thoughts might tell us. This was very much supported by Nan and her team. Nan and her team are not from this community. They are from New York State, and they are all in rural communities such as ours. That's where they live, but not in this community. And I think that helped them essentially stay quite independent and above the fray. Nan has been awesome. I mean, I guess I just have to say, and this community owes her a debt because she has worked tirelessly on this and been our North Star in helping us think through things that this committee, really wasn't pre-trained to consider or think about. The committee itself has worked incredibly well, I think, and I am very grateful to all of the committee members. The committee members are essentially representative of the community itself. I think it was actually a good committee that this town board put together. All right.
I
And
think Claudia is here too. Is there any other on your
yeah,
committee?
there's Claudia. Okay,
Anybody
Margaret,
else?
Fernanda,
Yep.
and Timmy Bonacue. And Buffy. Where's Buffy? Okay.
Good.
And everybody played a part, and one of the things that we found is that as the community had a chance to think about this and talk through this, through the structure that Nan, the paces that Nan put us through, the community started to be much more constructive in how it discussed this matter. And we were grateful for that. And frankly, as I think you can see in the report itself, there was actually a fair amount of common ground. There was a lot of things that the community agreed upon. And that, I think, bodes well for our town. I think the number one thing that this town agrees upon is that this is a very special place, and people love it here. And I think the second thing that they agree upon is that this town board has worked tirelessly to make it that special place. All right, and I will say that we heard enormous personal support for you. All right. And I think the third thing that they agreed upon is they would like this community to both progress and stay the same at the exact same time. And there was a lot of discussion about that. But in toto, what we found is that this community really appreciated its existing comprehensive plan, thought that that was a very important part of the DNA, and as a consequence was quite grateful to you for having this a discussion come into play to look at the comprehensive plan. And if we were going to make changes, we had to make them very carefully. The community has definitely evolved since the comprehensive plan was put in place, and yet the community overwhelmingly seemed to affirm the existing comprehensive plan. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Nan. She has a bit of an agenda, and what we thought we would do is go through a quick summary of what's in here, just to warm ourselves up. And then, as I understand it, we would open ourselves up to questions from you. And anybody on the committee is encouraged, if they feel moved to speak on any topic, just come rush the microphone, please, okay? And then when we're through that phase, we leave it up to you as to what you'd like to do next. Okay?
Sure.
All right, so Nan?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So thank you, and thank you for that introduction. I like to consider myself as just a facilitator. And so really the hard work in the analysis and thinking about an enormous amount of information was really done by the committee. So it really was, I was just kind of, keeping everybody together and forcing you guys to ask a lot of questions and answer a lot of things. So I appreciate the accolades, but it was really the community. I mean, that's what a community planner is really all about, is trying to get the community to try and understand itself better and decide where it wants to go. So this is my first opportunity with the town board, so I appreciate being able to meet you in person. I think I met some of you or most of you at the open house, but it's really great. Thank you for having the meeting and the opportunity to do a little summary. And I don't know from way back when you first signed the contract with me, just as a little intro, my firm is Community Planning and Environmental Associates, and we have been doing community and environmental planning for about 30 years, 29 and a half years. And we only specialize in small and rural communities like Washington. I don't do any big urban kind of things. So our specialty is really trying to help communities like yours understand your assets, understand your capacity, understand what it is you want for yourself, and try and give you the tools to get you there. And that's what a comprehensive plan is really about. It's a policy statement. It's a direction for you to kind of all hang your hats on. And and I know that you put a lot of hard work into getting the 2015 plan done, and that was great. But comprehensive plans are not meant to sit on the shelfers. And so it's always a really healthy, good thing for a community to take a step back and look at itself and say, has anything changed? Are there new issues in town that we have to address? So re-looking at where you're at and re-looking and evaluating to see whether your comprehensive plan still meets the needs of the community is really what planning is all about. And in fact, the state town law 272A, which governs the development of a comprehensive plan, has very few requirements of the community and how to do it. But one of them is that it should be reevaluated over time. And so what you went through here in the community, I think is really healthy and really important, and a normal and a good part of planning. I have just I didn't make enough. I didn't realize there were going to be so many people in the audience, but I do have copies of what I'm going to go through, and I can send Tim this, and you can post it, and everyone can have a copy. It's really nothing different than what's in the report. It's just a summary of it. So if you can indulge me for a minute, I just wanted to refresh everybody on how we got to this point and what we did and why we did some of the things within the planning process that we did. So how I look at what the committee actually did was a comprehensive plan for a specific topic, which is not unusual. A lot of communities have issues that come up, and we say, oh, this is an issue and we really didn't address this or don't have the answers in the guidance in the comprehensive plan. So my approach to helping you through this was to start with the 3 basic planning questions that we always ask, whether it's an update to a plan, an evaluation of a topic, or anything else. And that is, what are the current conditions in the community? Where does the community want to go? And how do you get there? Those 3 questions really underpin and is at the essence of any planning effort, whether it's an open space plan, an economic development plan, or whatever. So that's what we attempted to do. So in order to answer those 3 questions, we started off with a process where we tried to answer the question of where the community is at now. And part of that is community input and trying to find out what the community is thinking, what's on their mind, what they think are issues and strengths and opportunities to be taken. So as part of the process, we of course reviewed the 2015 comprehensive plan. We of course reviewed the zoning law, both for the town and the village, to see how they interrelate with each other. And we had, I know that the charge for the committee was to do a survey of the community, but these days you can't rely on just a survey for community input. Some people do them, some people don't do them. So we had, I think, a much more robust um, community engagement process that's very similar to what we would do even if we were starting in a community that is just doing a new comprehensive plan. So that included that we did 2 focus groups, one with just general residents, one focused on business owners in the community, and those were designed to give us kind of a first look. And they represented different locations and different stakeholders in the town, and the committee identified the people who would be invited to that. And it was a really good discussion to start hearing the issues and the opportunities and what was on people's minds. So we had the 2 focus groups. That was followed by an in-person open house at the firehouse, whatever direction that might be, that way. That was an opportunity to dig down more into the topic, learn more about specifics about what, whether people liked the vision in the existing comprehensive plan, to really talk about different kinds of hospitality uses and how people felt about it. Look at maps and really try and learn what people had to say. And we had about 118 people come through that afternoon of the open house. And that was in February. And it was also during COVID, in the height of COVID, I think.
Well, we were worried about it.
We were worried about COVID. So anyway, so we extended the in-person open house to an online version of that, where we basically asked the same questions and allowed people to have the same kind of input on an online format. And we had 113 people respond to that online effort. All of that led to, well, what are the questions we want to ask? What are the topics we need to explore in a general survey? And so we then conducted a townwide survey where a postcard was mailed out to every household, and everybody had an opportunity to go online or on paper to do the survey. And that was just, and this is all in there, you can read it. There was 690 responses that came into the survey, and that was both the online and the paper responses. Before we were hired, the committee had I think 2 listening sessions that also provided input as to how people felt about things. And then the CPRC meetings that were held on Zoom were all open meetings via Zoom, but still people were able to hopefully see that it was we wanted to have a transparent process so everybody could see what we were doing and when we were doing it and how they could participate. So that was kind of like the overall public engagement that helps us answer where does the community want to go. And to answer, and I just want to say that when we start, my approach to these things is I listen to the community first. I did not read your zoning or your comprehensive plan until after our public engagement was done, because I just wanted a empty slate, hear what you had to say. So all of that was, trying to do an unbiased, transparent look at what the community was about and where you wanted to go. So to answer the question of what are the current conditions in the town, we did a lot of evaluation and data collection. We identified lodging facilities in Dutchess County to try and get an understanding of the regional capacity for lodging facilities and hospitality venues. We studied the hospitality trends that were going on. Ellen Pemrick did an evaluation on all sorts of trends and changes that COVID brought to the tourism industry, and that is detailed in the appendix, or in the appendix. One of our other team members, Michael Stump, conducted an economic impact analysis of different hospitality scenarios so that you all could kind of have an idea of, well, what does it really mean if, from an economic point of view, for a certain kind of hospitality development. And we looked at 3 different scenarios, from very small scale to larger scale, to look at what the potential economic impacts of that would be. We looked at the current fiscal conditions in the town. I know you guys all know from your own budget, you know that far better than anyone. I had access to the state has a program that evaluates every community and school district in New York State, where they basically rate every community in terms of its fiscal health and identify communities who are in fiscal trouble. So we looked through all that information. You may feel differently locally, but from their perspective and their criteria, you were not on any of those lists. And then we looked at in-depth environmental analysis to try and understand the capacity of the town for development. And so we looked at things like mapping surface waters, that was wetlands, streams, and floodplains, aquifers. We looked at stream riparian buffers, agricultural soils, which correlates to agricultural capacity and where there's the best place to farm, forested areas, important habitats, rare species locations. There's an incredible amount of data now for, luckily, all of you in the Hudson River Valley, unlike other parts of New York State, but you guys have like a lot of really great information. So that whole exercise gave us information about where there were environmental sensitivities, where there are buildable opportunities. What is the landscape telling us? Because rural planning is based on, and our whole tradition of how communities developed from when we first started is based on our natural resources. And we can trace our communities back to, you know, where is there a stream, and there could be a mill and things like that. So that gives us not only information about where could development as a whole be, where are the smart places to be, where are the things that, if a community is very environmentally oriented, where are there places that we should stay away from. The other thing that that exercise gives you, regardless of what direction you ultimately take in the town, you have a whole GIS database now of all of these things. So all of these maps, while they might be small, in here we can certainly print up big ones for you. We can give you the digital data that you could use, the planning board can use. So there's all sorts of, you know, practical things that will come just from the maps. We also evaluated traffic volumes to see where the cars are going. We did what's called a view shed analysis by, in your plan and zoning, you identify specific scenic roads that have been identified specifically by the town as scenic roads. And so we did an analysis that said, okay, we're on those scenic roads. What are the views that you're looking at from those scenic roads? So that can all be mapped. That was all mapped to try and get an idea of where there are important view sheds. And we also did what's called a buildable land analysis. So your code identifies certain criteria such as wetlands, water bodies, floodplains, slopes greater than 20%, I think it was, or 25%. I'd have to look that up. Anyway, so we can map that all out and say, according to your own criteria, where are the buildable locations in town? And we can put all of those map layers together to give us an idea of the capacity in the town for all sorts of, you know, where's the best places for agriculture, where's the best places for development, where are the sensitive areas. So that, in the kind of planning that I do in rural areas, understanding the landscape is a part of answering the question, what's going on in the town. So all of that gets us to, okay, now we know what we've got. We have a really good idea of where the community says they want to go. And the committee was charged with, do we need to update our comprehensive plan? What do we need to say about this topic related to hospitality? What do we do about this? And so we relied on all of that information to draw some observations and some recommendations that the committee discussed extensively, and that's what you have in the evaluation report. So I think the bottom line, the committee was asked whether the comprehensive plan should be updated, and my recommendation, and I think the committee included it in the report so they concur, is that the comprehensive plan should be updated but not changed in its philosophy and approach. Your 2015 plan, it says right in it, reaffirmed the, I forget the dates now, I think it was the 1987 and 1989 plan. There was a statement in there that basically says, we kind of feel the same way we did then in 2015. And all of the public input that we had through the focus groups, the survey, the open house, and everything else was that basically the values of the community, the kind of community you're hoping for, the direction you're hoping for, really hasn't changed in 2021, 2022. And so the premises of the 2015 plan, in my opinion, were strongly reaffirmed. But what the comprehensive plan doesn't do, it doesn't really answer the question about these hospitality uses. It was kind of silent on it. It talked about development, it talked about where development should be, it was talked about environmental protection and historic protection and community character, but it didn't really give a lot of guidance as how do you handle the question in front of you. So I think that what the comprehensive plan needs to help you move to the next stage is to recognize you've had this issue, these questions have come up about what do you do about it, and you basically, this is an update to the comprehensive plan. The work that was done is a comprehensive planning effort oriented to one topic, and in and of itself could be like an appendix as an update to the comprehensive plan. And many times that's what we do for a community that, has either a topic or some issue that has come up that they hadn't really hit the nail on the head with the comprehensive plan. And so and then the important reason to do that is that if you ultimately decide you want to change the zoning, there's a strong tie between zoning and your comprehensive plan. That the comprehensive plan is the policy statement for the community, and the zoning is the tool that implements that policy. And so to make zoning changes, you really need to go back and say, oh, well, what does our community want to say about this? What is our policy towards this? So that's why I think it's important to address this, be honest that the question has arisen, and that you've had an opportunity to do a study. You have all sorts of information to analyze it. You've had a great deal of public input to help you in the direction, and that it would serve the community well to answer those questions and have some guidance. So that's the big picture of the question is, should the comprehensive plan be changed? I think a better way of approaching it, it should be updated to address this issue. But nothing that you will find in this report really changes the essential direction that plan has already headed you in. So at the end of the first part of the report, which is I think the first 25 pages or so, there's a summary table, which is the third page of this, that I think is in kind of a nutshell the major highlights of the recommendations that we've made. I think that there's a lot of clarification that can be done with updating definitions. I think your zoning overall is got a lot of really good stuff in it, and in a lot of places you're light years ahead of many other rural communities. But I think it could be strengthened, even if the hospitality thing hadn't come up. There's still some really, you have like the great environmental protection overlay, which I applaud and support. It's all in there in the zoning, but it's not mapped, so it's not effective. So there's a whole bunch of recommendations in here to try and tighten up and move your zoning to the place where it really could be. So there's definitions that could be updated. I think that another one of our observations is that the 2015 comprehensive plan kind of integrates the village of Millbrook into who you are. And so I think your long-term planning should continue to integrate with the village of Millbrook, even though it's its own entity, it has its own zoning and its own its own board, and it's separate, but you're not separate, you're integrated together. So I think there's recommendations in the report about really partnering with the village to continue finding solutions to these growth issues. So I think the kind of meat of the question about, okay, if we're going to update the comprehensive plan, what do we want to say about hospitality? And the committee's recommendations, what we've kind of concluded from our work, is that you have a history of using overlay districts in the town through your aquifer protection overlay, your environmental protection overlay. I think there are others as well. But we recommend that you create a hospitality overlay district, which would allow an inn, and to create a new category for that specific kind of hospitality. So an inn is a smaller, lower intensity kind of hospitality use. It's not a resort, it's not a retreat, it's not a motel or hotel. Would have its own definition, and that the overlay district would allow for inns in two primary locations, and that would be in the Washington Hollow area and in an environmentally suitable location immediately adjacent to the village. The plan was very specific about not wanting to have infrastructure or a lot of growth that kind of leaked out and spread out from the village. You have a concise, dense area that that is kind of your character. And so those two areas, we don't want to go too far afield because of that. And if you look at if you look at the maps and the environmental features, you have a lot of environmental challenges in the town. You have a lot of great resources from an environmental perspective that the community, and it's important. I think everyone concurs that environmental protection has been very important. So the overlay district would allow a small scale, limited amount of hospitality use. We asked the community in all of our input and engagement, what size hospitality was something that they felt was consistent with who Washington was. And it was very clearly on the smaller end. Some people wanted, there was a range from none to large, but it was mostly the 20 room limit was about the cutoff, and then the support for that dropped way off after 20 rooms. So we're recommending that within those two overlay areas where we would allow for inns, that they be limited to 20 rooms, and that they be, that the zoning would look at any kind of accessory uses that might go along with a hospitality, like could it have a restaurant or a bar, or could it have weddings and things like that, which are laid out in more detail in there. We recommended that currently in Mabbittsville, they allow for hotels, but again, looking at the scale, was that the definition in the zoning for a hotel doesn't really give you any clue of what a hotel really is. It could be 2 rooms or it could be 500 rooms. And so that's, again, a really good example of where the definitions matter. And so one of our recommendations is to replace the hotel definition with an inn, with the term inn, and we consistently use the word inn as the kind of hospitality that would be allowed and promoted in the zoning. But there's lots of other things that support that, and that would be the zoning lays the groundwork for design standards to make sure the things that go in are consistent with the character and the historical character of the town. You have a lot of that in the zoning, but haven't quite pushed the trigger on making it usable for the planning board to say, this is how we want something to look, because it uses language like, you know, that the town could hire an outside architect to come in and, you know, give us advice on how something should look. My feeling is you should be the ones to decide that, not some outside person. So I think there's several recommendations in here that talk about doing, and that was in your 2015 plan, is have those design standards, get them in place so that they're a tool. Developers like to know what the rules are. They want to know what the rules are, and if they follow the rules, they've got a yes at the end. When you're vague in a zoning law, it leads to a lot of heartache on both sides, on the developer side, on the community side, because you're trying to figure it out as you go. So I'm a real believer in, if you have something to say about the design, the siting, the architecture, your zoning ought to say it. So you can be clear about what the rule is, and you let everyone know what the rule is right off the bat. So there's quite a few recommendations to follow through on those things. We did look at the question of short-term rentals, and there was questions in all of our public engagement about whether the town should address short-term rentals, and the answer was yes. And I think the survey gave us a lot of really good information about what level of regulation in local programs would you want for short-term rentals. So I think that's outlined, and I think even in the, you know, I forget, 6 or 7 months since we did the survey, everywhere I go, short-term rentals are at the top of everyone's hot button list. It's an important issue to be addressed in every community, especially in the Hudson Valley. What are some other things that I can highlight here? I think I also wanted to emphasize that your 2015 comprehensive plan has a lot of really good recommendations in it, a lot of really good stuff that hasn't been incorporated into the zoning and the subdivision regulations yet, and they're perfectly valid. I think the community has reaffirmed those directions, and I think you have a lot to go on already that, you know, is waiting there. The policy is there to be included and updated into the zoning. So I don't want to take up too much time because I want to have questions. Did I miss any like big points from the committee?
I think the going back to the question of the town and the village and how they interact together, that was something that the committee spent a lot of time discussing, and I think the community did. It's confusing. It's confusing to all of us in some way, shape, or form. It took us a while to explain it to Nan and team. But one thing is that it does work. And I think we all sort of know that. We did make a recommendation that there was a fair amount of support for hospitality within the village itself.
Oh, wait a minute.
And that, you know, obviously there is a definition of inn in the town, in the village, pardon me, and our definition in the town of inn was somewhat consistent with that village definition. Frankly, we saw some parity there. We also recommended that in the village itself, it's a somewhat narrow area where the hospitality is allowed, where inns are allowed, and that there might actually be in the village the opportunity for some areas for the village to look at that and add some areas, that there were some interesting places somewhat near to the Bennett Commons green space that's coming, and there's some interesting buildings that are not necessarily fully occupied. So we thought that there was an opportunity for hospitality in the village and for a relook on the part of the village to think about that as well. Not our call, just an observation. I think the other thing that we talked about was the notion of, and we spent a lot of time thinking about, was the notion of density. And so in our town, density, one of the most dense areas in the town is in Washington Hollow. And as you progress east and north, you get less and less dense. All right. And we did get the sense from all of our findings, all of our communications, that people supported a bit more, they could get their head around a bit more hospitality in denser areas. All right. So one of the things that we talked a little bit about was the idea of the definition of inn might be 20 rooms, but that there could be a density bonus that you might have in play. And we spent a lot of time thinking about Mabbittsville and the fact that it's a mixed use area right now, and it's actually a less dense area than Washington Hollow. All right. And we had a lot of debate about that, and thought that the town board might consider a bit more density in Washington Hollow and a little less density in Mabbittsville, and there could be a little bit of a sliding scale. We also thought about the idea of whomever does choose to actually do a inn might be able to get a bit of a density bonus if they did things that in the eyes of the town were good for the town for posterity. So, for example, if they did a Leeds building, which was, very environmentally clear, that might get them a few more rooms or something like that. So we tried to think, a little bit of flexibility. We're cognizant that a town needs to think about today and tomorrow, and have a little bit of leeway in there. So you'll see that we, in some of the fine print, put some thought into that. We also did make some recommendations against glamping or against RV lots and things like that.
Yeah, we specifically asked questions about that, and there was just very little support for that kind of hospitality. And so I think that, overall, I think there was recognition that there's a balance that the community is seeking, and that it's recognizing that some kinds of hospitality are needed and consistent with who you are as a community, but those were limited in location and limited in scale. So there wasn't anything that is in the report that says, no, you shouldn't have any anywhere. It's trying to find the right style and intensity and scale that fits in with all of the other goals and values of the community.
Yeah. The last point is on short-term rentals. Um, I think it's fair to say that the personal opinions of the committees were, worried about short-term rentals. All right, but we really felt that the community itself is still trying to understand short-term rentals. All right, and so our recommendations in short-term rentals were reasonably limited. Right, basically what we said is that you ought to try to be able to define it. You should regulate them. You should understand where they are. You should charge a fee so that you can actually pay for the permitting process and pay for the kinds of oversight that you need. And that's where we stopped. We didn't say anything more about that, all right? But we do essentially allude to the notion that you should pay attention to it, because I think there was a fair amount of concern about remote corporate ownership of the short-term rentals and what that could do to our community. On the one hand, it's great; it provides liquidity and perhaps could be a floor value to real estate values, and we take that pretty damn seriously. Okay. On the other hand, if you have a nameless corporation in some state across the country that owns these things, we could sense that that could create a loss of the community that we care so deeply about. So in asking you to essentially regulate and monitor it, that would therefore give you the data to be able to assess if down the road you wanted to make incremental steps in that area. I'm going to turn to the committee itself. Claudia, Margaret, Buffy, Tim, have we missed anything here on this? Fernanda?
I think you're covering it.
Okay. All right.
So I think that that were just some highlights. There's a lot of detail in there, and we included all of the public comments, all of the survey results, all of the maps, everything is in there. So I kind of just wanted to set the stage for getting everyone on the same plane and open up to whatever questions and answers that you might need.
Do any of the board members have any questions before I open it up?
Question on process. You spoke to and used various tools to speak to the entire community, particularly the mailing that took place in the open house. Were you satisfied with your return statistically analysis, proportion mailed out, proportion received back? You were pleased with the rate of return that we got on those?
Yes, very much so. I think, it's this day and age is very hard to engage the community in these even online, in-person type things. So I think it was very much consistent with what kind of feedback we get, the percentage feedback we get when we do some sort of planning effort in the community. And that's why we didn't rely just on a survey. The focus group and the two open house efforts. And so what we look for is consistency. So we learned something from the focus groups. We reaffirmed those things or looked to see if those were going to be consistent with what we got in the open house effort and with the survey. And there was consistency in the direction that the community was telling us through all of those things. So I think that, and I did look it up, I think that the survey response was a little higher for this time compared to what was in the 2015 plan. So yeah, I think it's very much in line. I felt very comfortable with it. We never get 100% of our communities involved, but I think it was a really good representation, and it wasn't anything unexpected from my experience.
Follow up too. There's a lot of material in here, a lot of recommendations. People get impatient and want implementation quickly. What do you foresee as a timeline to kind of start to address these issues in a code perspective?
Well, there's, I mean, what I would like to see is have the comprehensive plan as recommended, updated and formalized as the direction you want to go. Usually it's the comprehensive plan is adopted or updated and adopted, and then the zoning follows it. Some communities do them at the same time. They kind of say, well, you know, we've done all of this work and we're going to just jump into the update of the regulatory and do kind of one community process for it. There is a process. In order to update a comprehensive plan, like let's just say you're going to say, well, we're just going to take this and make it an appendix to the comprehensive plan and update it that way. You still have to have a public hearing. You still have to do seeker, which is the environmental review. It still has to go to the county for planning board review. The comprehensive plan is adopted by the board as a resolution of the board. So there's a little bit of time and process that goes into that. The zoning part is somewhat, it's often unpredictable because we never quite know what bumps in the roads we might get as we start drafting things. But I think that if you all accepted these recommendations in the direction that it's set, that to take those recommendations and put them into the zoning language is not a heavy lift. I think what it's more time, from my experience in the process, is more of the discussion locally to make sure you have all, the words are all right and everyone agrees with them. On the technical side, I don't think it's long. It has to be that long. You know, so I think you could get the if you did the comprehensive plan and then the zoning as separate entities, just logistically, I think you would need probably 3 months, you know, by the time you have the public hearing, the county planning board review and the seeker, it would be the 3 months to get that adopted. You know, I would hope that you could, if you set a tight time frame for a zoning update, that with good direction and that it could be drafted in a couple months and discussed. It still has to go through public hearing, seeker, and county planning board review. So it has its own process to update the zoning. But, you know, it's not 1 month's worth of work. It's you know, could you do it in less than a year? Absolutely, if you are committed to do it. But it's, you know, I'd say you probably realistically need 6 or 8 months, from my experience.
So I just, oh, I'm sorry.
I just was going to add that Nan is running a special right now. Okay? You know, so she could probably knock a month or 2 off and some money too. So.
Well, yeah.
So in order, I just want to be clear. In order to adopt this, like it says in here that maybe it could be made as an addendum to the comprehensive plan. So we do that. We still have to go through the secret process. We
Yes.
still have to do the hearing. We still
Yes.
have, I just want to.
Yes, absolutely.
But before we even do that, it looks like we have a list of things that we need to do, like update the definitions, meet with the village, etc.
Well, those would be-
I mean,
No, not to update the comprehensive plan.
not to-
No, those would be, those are what implementation steps that would come after you adopt the plan.
after.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
That's sort of a follow-up to my question, but before I ask my question, I'm just, you know, Joe has done this multiple times over the course of the year, but I wanted to, you know, speak for everybody at this table. Thank you, Anne, and your team so much for everything you've done. Tim, as the fearless leader of this group, thank you for all you've done, and thank you to the committee for all the work you've done. It's been a tremendous amount of work, and all of you debt of gratitude for that, so thank you. Yes, we should all give you a round of applause. In one of your recommendations, you talked about the natural resources inventory. I wanted to ask you how how that is sort of a follow-up to all the mapping work that you did. I mean, it seems the mapping work was so extensive and it's quite updated from what we currently have. Do you feel that's sufficient for us to sort of use that as a basis for, if we're going to take this as an addendum and then kind of work towards doing that in the future, or do we have to do that before we kind of identify?
No, I think there's, so many of the things that we mapped would be the same maps and the same information that would be part of a natural resource inventory or an NRI. The NRI is more in depth. So instead of just having a map with a paragraph of, conclusions of what the map is telling us, and if you look at any NRI, you'll see it goes into great detail about interpreting all of the resources on every map. I think that it's the level of detail, and it's also the NRIs there is definitely overlap between an NRI and a comprehensive plan, and many comprehensive plans have full components of that, of that in there. It depends on how you would use it. Some communities use their NRIs to go on to do an open space plan. And that would be a further step. So if you wanted to, we didn't do any analysis that said, here's some really environmentally sensitive locations in the town, and here are recommendations on how you could promote protection of those areas. So that really comes from further analysis of the information that could come. But I think that the mapping that we did was as extensive as any normal comprehensive plan would be, and it certainly gives you, we mapped 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 10 plus the view shed and the buildable locations. You've got a lot of information on to make some decisions on. So I think it's certainly. The NRI is nice. You can try and get funding from DEC through the estuary program for an NRI, and I think that would be really helpful to have. But I think it would build on what we've done and not take the place of it.
Just for the community's knowledge, this past January, the town board offered a resolution into our minutes that 2015 total comprehensive plan will be looked at in 2025 and established that will be a 10-year rolling process. If small issues come up like hospitality did, there's that opportunity within that 10-year spectrum to pull a piece out and take an immediate look at it. But we did not have that process in place as far as a recommendation that a board adopted. So in 2025, full comprehensive plan will be looked at. Hospitality has been just a minor piece. On short-term rentals, which was addressed, and I spoke to Tim during his committee's process. We've begun to take a look at short-term rentals as an economic entity and also a hospitality entity within the town. And the state is sponsoring a professional presentation on short-term rentals up in the Wallace Center, at which town board members, attorneys will be present. We'll start to bring some of that material back into our discussions here, and we'll start to look at that as a piece that's already been identified in this plan that Nan has done. But we had already started to take a look at that. So some of this stuff is mobile now, and it's also active. And it hasn't been stagnant, but this gives us another reason to start to do this type of stuff and then plug it into the recommendations. I have a question for you. When towns start to do this process, do you find that all the recommendations that the professionals give them are adopted, or do you go through a kind of a morphing of some of the recommendations and they actually get tweaked a little bit, or how have you found that analysis?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, the recommendations that you pull forward, I've kind of given the committee, and the committee has, kind of discussed and tweaked and changed. I mean, some of the recommendations in here I shouldn't say some, all of the recommendations in here were reviewed by the committee, changed, expanded, shrunk, some they liked, some they didn't like. But I can give you what, it's like when you go to the doctor and they say, I think you should go on a diet, but do you go on a diet? So it's up to you whether you're going to take those recommendations or not. And it has to fit what you all feel is right for the community. So I think from from an outsider's perspective, I think they all add value, but it's just like it's like your 2015 comprehensive plan. Not all of them have been implemented. And that's what happens. So, I wish they could all be, but, for one reason or another, they don't. And sometimes we start off with a really great direction in the comprehensive plan, and through the updating the zoning process, it kind of morphs because we think about something else that came up and it tweaks it a little bit. So as long as it's consistent, the main thing is what you get out at the end in your zoning update needs to be consistent with the goals and the vision of the community. And if you can make that tie, maybe you'll go in a straight line, but maybe you'll go like this, as long as you have that tie and you're meeting those goals.
As we thought about this, there were certain things that were so overwhelmingly recommended from the data that we felt, essentially compelled to follow, right? And so Nan would point that out, and we'd say, well, we might want to tweak this or tweak that. And so we'd have a lot of debate about, our listening role. Right now, we're a listening body. You're an elected governing body, right? That's a different thing. But I will say that we spent a lot of time trying to think about the major issues and tying that back to what the data was clearly telling us. All right, so that
in the committee, we had an initial set of recommendations, but every single one of them was discussed by the committee.
right.
So I don't think you should look at this as just my report. It's really a report of the committee because they discussed every single thing in it.
Yeah,
Right.
We get that.
Yeah, okay.
That's clear.
Yeah.
yeah.
good, good.
That's what it's meant to be. And I think certainly you would not be doing your job if you didn't look at this and debate this among yourselves, all right, and think about this, all right? But our goal was to try to deliver something that was as close to a final product as we knew how to do, all right? So that you wouldn't have to redo it again, right? That was that's why it passes the thud test, I guess, is what I would say. Recognizing you're on this, and frankly, because there was a lot of interaction among us during this time frame, we tried to think about things that mattered. Like, for example, I know how important the short-term rental piece is because we talked about it, all right? And so we tried to think that sort of stuff through as well.
Okay, so we're getting, just one second. We're getting close to 7 o'clock, and I want to get some questions from the audience in a second. Bob, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just, I think the first thing I want to say is more of a statement than a question. And I know that you say that 690 responses out of 4,700 people is a good response. I find that extremely hard to swallow myself personally. I kind of wish maybe we had tried a little harder to reach out to people that we never hear from. And there's quite a few people I've spoken to that they don't do surveys and they are busy all the time, and that, you know, gee, I just couldn't make the meetings. I mean, you know, we had 118 people at the open house, 113 people at the virtual meetings. And we see the same faces over and over, but I kind of, again, it's a statement. I'm not questioning you. You're the professional. If you say that's a good response, I believe you 100%. I just feel it's not the voice of the whole town. The second thing I want to bring up is, and I read the plan. You guys did a great job. I really love the priority recommendations. The one, though, that I really want to question is the current size limitation on non-residential uses within the hamlet of Madison. You want to keep that? Well, I wish somebody would tell me where you can put more residential houses in Madisonville. How can you increase? It has to be twofold before you can put any commercial entity in Madisonville. And that goes back to, I believe, the 87 plan. I questioned it then, I'm questioning it again now. And I'm asking you, did you guys look at Madisonville? Look at the map, the hamlet zoning map? Where, unless you put houses at the town park, I don't know where else you could put any residential houses. So how can we have a hotel in Madisonville unless, you know, unless you, even if you took some houses and made hotels out of them, you'd still need to get double the amount of square footage.
Yeah.
So I think that you know, Mabbittsville, we're allowed to have, you know, hotels, motels, inns in our 87 plan, but you need to have twice as much residential growth. So as far as I'm concerned, if we're to move forward with making changes, that's a change we should make.
So I'll take a stab and then
Sure.
I
Please
ask
do.
you on the on the question of does, you know, our work, you know, did we get to all of the voices, right? You know, does this represent the community? All I can tell you is we damn well tried. Okay, you know.
Oh, again, it was not a question.
No. You know,
Yeah.
so just we did bulk mailings, and we did 3 of them actually, and we got. I think I want to applaud Margaret on this in particular because we got better at it every time, right? And we ended up trying different vendors and the like. We ended up doing many posters. We ended up starting to play with Instagram and Facebook and areas like that. You know, what's fascinating to me is in an era where there is so much debate about certain things, and some of it's really passionate, which we're all have experienced, particularly on this matter, that the relative participation in all of our elections is not been that high, all right? And so it's you know, we do seem to get somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people who are consistently in this. And so I think this is a group thing we're going to have to keep on working on. So to a certain extent, we were proud of what we got and paid a lot of attention to it. So there was a lot of passion in that. So that would be the first thing I'd say. As it relates to Mabbittsville, oh baby, did we look at Mabbittsville. Oh, we thought about it a lot. We debated it a lot, okay? And this was one of the areas where we tried to be fact-driven, all right? And we did not sense enough support, and perhaps it's because there's not enough understanding about the matter to make a recommendation to change it, all right? There were on the committee, there was a full range, right? There were people who wanted to get rid of the mixed use altogether and actually not have any hospitality there because it's not particularly dense. There's an aquifer there, and hey, let's just leave it in Washington Hollow. And we said, no. That's starting to be our opinions. We have to actually sort of follow where the data was, and as you see. There is interest in Mabbittsville for hospitality, but it is substantively lower than what the interest was in Washington Hollow or near, in the village or immediately adjacent. And so there were those on the committee who essentially said, "Hey, see that shows that we should just do away with it altogether." There, all right. It is a very narrow area.
How do you, when you speak about density, what's the proper definition of density? I mean,
You mean residential density?
Or commercial density.
I mean, it's measured, residential density is measured in the number of dwelling units per acre, usually. Some communities flip that around and say, well, we're going to have like a 3-acre minimum lot size, which is a way of looking at density.
right.
Density is also,
So how did you come up with the fact that Washington Hollow is more dense than Mabbittsville?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's more dense in that, number of units per acre. It's a more developed area and it has more opportunities for commercial development. I think, and it was an area that was more acceptable for that kind of commercial development.
Okay, it's just, Mabbittsville, I was born and raised there my whole life. And Mabbittsville was, with the sporadic homes in the area, and most of those homes for many years had, customary home occupations in them, and it's on the highway. I don't think they're going to be building any houses. I don't know of any vacant lots. I know there was a few things for sale, but they're either a home or a business already.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to continue that non-residential uses within the hamlet of Mabbittsville with that formula, this doesn't really make any sense. It didn't make any sense when they came out with the law. I tried to fight it back in those days, but.
Well, I mean, look, obviously you guys get to debate that and decide that. What we were trying to say in our piece is that when it came to hospitality, there was much more interest on the part of the community to put hospitality in places outside of Mabbittsville than in Mabbittsville itself, all right? And there was a little bit of, when you just oppose that with such an interest around the aquifer itself, which came through in all of our piece, which obviously is, in parts underneath Mabbittsville and in parts adjacent, depending on regardless of what you do on the mixed use piece, which wasn't really our charge, all right, as it related to hospitality, our view was caution in Mabbittsville, but keeping it in there, all right. So that was kind of our sense of the community and what was happening, and that actually the part of that was because of people understood the limits that were in place and felt protected by that in some way, shape, or form. You know, that did definitely come through if you look at the transcripts and the like. But you're certainly a much more subject matter expert on Mabbittsville, all right, you know, than we are. So those were good comments. Are there anything
Yeah,
else?
15 minutes, just so everybody
Okay,
knows.
yep.
So
No, I would like to,
Yeah.
that's all I had for now.
Okay, so when you get to speak, would you just tell us your name, please?
My name is Fernando Notable. I have a question. Things have changed a lot since 1985 and 87. And one of the major changes was not addressed is that the world is getting warmer, hotter. We're getting less water, and the water table here is suffering. And the water tables all around the Millbrook will suffer. So when we think in terms of what is permissible or recommendable density for new buildings, and how many people we want to bring to live in our community, I think this ought to be kept very much in mind. On that line, I suggest also that you consult frequently with people from the Carrier Region, which are experts on many of the matters discussed tonight, and whose advice you'll get probably free. I mean, they are intelligent people that in our community, we should use their advice. The third thing I'd like to mention, because I think the community is walking into it without any readiness, is that we might have a very severe fire season this fall because it has been extraordinarily dry. The forest was extraordinarily dry, and anyone dropping a cigarette or a match will start a fire that will be very hard to control. And it is my impression, my suspicion, I'm not sure, that our fire department would be totally overwhelmed by such a catastrophe. We would not be well positioned to handle it or to do things that we haven't given it much thought. So those are my only comments. Thank you. My other comment, Bob, is how many people voted for you? Do you remember?
No, I do not.
It might have been around 600, you think?
Could be, no, I'm not.
Let's keep that in mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
I will keep that in mind.
My name is Alex Pamela. I live on North Shanks Road, 3 miles north of Turkey. Question for Nan and for the chair of the committee. We have 5 other villages within towns in Douglas County. Are you aware, or could you find out, if any of those other towns had to go through this hospitality exercise, if you will? And are there any lessons learned that we can bring back here to the town of Washington for their deliberations?
You know, I'm not sure. I don't know all of the goings on with all of the communities. I've worked up in Northeast, in Pine Plains, in the northern part of the county. They have various development pressures and issues that they've undergone and explored. I'm among the communities I work with, they haven't had a specific, let's just look at hospitality and see what it means. It might have been part of a broader comprehensive planning on development kind of issue. I just, you know, I would only know from the communities I work with.
Skip, you want something?
Yeah, just to clarify what you mentioned before, Tim, about the committee thinking that Bob brought the point up, but tried to answer this. Mabbittsville, I mean, Washington Hollow being more dense than Mabbittsville. Maybe when you were figuring that, you were figuring what's in the town of Pleasant Valley. 90% of Washington Hollow businesses are in Pleasant Valley, not the town of Washington. You've only got what Campbell has there, Cottonwood Inn, and Nova Training Center. That's all that's commercial in that area right now. So I don't see it as being that dense unless you include that, which is in the other town. The line is right at Copperfield.
What, so let me, there's two questions floating here, all right? I think one of the, to your question, the committee itself obviously is more familiar with, you know, Dutchess County and the immediate Litchfield County and the like. And so we did spend a lot of time thinking about Rhinebeck and Amenia and Tivoli and actually spent a little bit of time looking across and thinking a little bit about Newburgh and the like. So there was a fair amount of discussion. We also spent some time thinking about Washington, Connecticut. Also is sort of another kind of a proxy. What we found was, as we discussed that good communication between the town and the village, if you can actually achieve that's pretty sacred, right? And that helps. That was finding number one. And finding number two is that you can be very successful having inns in villages, but you also have to be careful not to get too many inns in the village. Like the right amount of inns actually adds to the vibrancy of the village, and that if you go too far, that you might actually start to undermine the community itself in the village, which is because people will start to say it's become too commercial and they'll move out of it, right? So that was very much on our mind as we talked about. So that's just on the debate. And then as it relates to you, Mr. Safari, I think your supposition is right in the sense that we are, notwithstanding how where the actual town line is. We're talking about, okay, you get off the Taconic, and as you get off the Taconic and head east and north, you get progressively more residential and rural with, a couple of pockets, but each of those pockets is also getting progressively more residential and rural, and so that was that. Yeah, yes, in our thinking, okay, okay, yeah. So just okay, yeah. And I will give a lot of credit actually. Timmy Bonacue was quite articulate on this matter, right? Just sort of, and I think it actually happened when he happened to get off the Taconic and drive to Tamarack one day, and it was just on his mind, right? So, for that point, okay. You want to take that?
We did not. I mean, it would. So no, we did not address the total number. We addressed by development. So by controlling the scale, the location and the scale of each individual. So is there in a zoning district? I guess so. When you have a zoning district and you say we're going to allow inns, then it's allowed as a use in that district. So there would be more opportunities for more than one.
So Nan kept us honest on that one. There was a lot of debate in the committee about maybe doing a sequencing where we would recommend to this gang that they try one, and then if that worked out well, then maybe they do another. And Nan basically, keeping us honest, said, look, the data, the community has not really suggested that to you, okay? Suggested the notion of doing it one at a time. So we basically felt that that would be maybe our own opinion coming forth rather than what the community was telling us, right? In terms of trying to limit this. I think from a practical standpoint, I think the committee ultimately got comfortable thinking that this is a great market, but we don't think that there's going to be 15 people coming and trying to do inns in our market anytime soon. We just didn't feel like there was that kind of demand. Oh, yeah.
We did
Oh,
that.
yeah. We spent a lot of time looking at that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we mapped,
Yeah. Yeah, like things like
other-
Troutbeck and
yeah,
stuff
we
like
talked-
that. Yeah.
We looked at
Yeah.
how many short-term rentals there are. We looked at where other hospitality venues are. We had a whole hospitality trend analysis that looked at how people are traveling and where they're going and how long they stay. And yes, so we did look at all of that.
What do you think the ban would be? I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am?
Hi, I'm Margaret Doyle, and I was involved in your comprehensive plan. I think you did a great job. You sent out things multiple times, and I know I got things multiple times. So I really wanted to address your thing about, it's too bad, some people don't do surveys, some people don't vote. Well, you have to be a good citizen. And if you don't vote, and you don't do surveys, you don't have the right to carp about it. You have to get involved.
I disagree with you wholeheartedly.
How?
You mean to tell me there's 4,000 people in the town that don't care about anything? You know, I disagree with you there. I just think that, yes, we get the same number of responses for even national elections probably. And when we ran, let's say, it was the same number of things. But I just wanted to bring out the point, and it was a statement, it wasn't even a question. I'm just saying it's disappointing that we don't hear from a lot of people, because we as board members,
Yes.
we do hear from these people from time to time when you bump into them and you ask them a question and they go, well, I got 3 kids, I got 2 playing soccer, I got,
Me too.
my wife's got my wife's got a job, I have a job, I just didn't have, it went over my head. And it makes me feel bad, you know, that we can't get more people to respond. That was my point.
I
Okay,
think that's something that.
right, I think they did a great job. I read this thing numerous times and so many things in there I agree with.
I think people are afraid that maybe your comment about or statement rather, about the amount of people who responded means you don't validate or find legitimacy in the survey itself. And so I think what people just want to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page is if we don't question our elections and we don't question the 2015 comprehensive plan, that maybe the optics aren't great to question this, which so many of our community did spend so much time going on these Zooms and going to the open houses and completing the surveys. And I think it's important to say, like, we all have very busy schedules. We do need to step forward and do what we think is right if we care about it. So if someone comes to you and says, I didn't get a chance to do that, you have to say, well, you got to be a part of this if you want to have your voice heard. I mean, I
We
think
say it all
that's
the time.
beauty of democracy, right? Is that we do have 960 voices here. This is a great, you know, testament to our community and something we can continue to draw from this document. This is what the people wanted. You guys did a great job in saying, what do we feel about democracy? What do we feel about hospitality? And this is the document that came from it.
And
So all our
I'm not doubting the
answers are
document.
here.
I just want to make the statement that it's just, I don't know how we can do it in the future, whether we can reach out even further to get more
Well,
people.
we can continue to try, but I think
right.
this is a great response and it's consistent with all our other responses.
You know,
I
just
agree
want-
with you.
can I
It's just not a good response.
maybe people were reached out, maybe they did get the survey, maybe they just didn't respond to it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
I am Andrew Kaplan. How do you get the full document?
This full doc, it's on the town website.
Town website?
Yeah.
It's on the homepage of the town website.
You scroll down, I won't take it off the homepage of the town website. Under tonight's meeting information, and the document and the supporting information are both listed there. And if people want copies, they can email me and print them out. It's been extensive, so if you want certain parts of it, let us know.
This would be a good opportunity for us to thank Mary Alex, who has been, you know, like an honorary member of the committee, okay, dealing with so much. We're super grateful.
say about the numbers.
Can you
that
give us
Bob
your
brought
name?
up and a few other things.
Can you give us your name?
Introduce myself. I was on the,
I'm only kidding.
I was on the original comprehensive plan committee on the land use for a lot of years and on that. And the consultants that came along all the time said that we had a little less numbers, by the way, than what Bob is talking about for this one, but said that this was higher than typical. That normally you don't get
I know that.
a lot of those numbers. So that represented pretty much the same input as we have now. And I'm very happy to hear, by the way, that you, the consultant, felt our comprehensive plan was a good plan. For the most part, represented what the community wanted. And listening to this one, I still think we're on the same page. We want a rural community. Most people are very glad they live here. And I think that's the goal, that if you got more people still involved, they would be saying the same thing. We're glad that we're living here, as opposed to maybe Pleasant Valley or some other places. And so I was one of the people, by the way, that did not want any changes in the plan. I didn't think hospitality was necessary at all. It wouldn't have come up if it wasn't for Migdale coming along. And I was more in line with what Mike said about waiting for the 10-year period to roll around and then take another look at it. But be that it may, here we are. And I think one of the possible exceptions, if we're going to go forward with hospitality, first of all, this is from, I'm going to give you the copy of this. It's from your report, by the way, where you recommend going very slowly with the hospitality, and it says implement these overlays in phases. And the reason I think that's important, because you don't know where this is going. And once you start to put things in place, buildings, they never come out. I've lived here a long time, not as long as some of you, but long enough. I've lived over 50 years here. Once you put buildings in, they don't come out. And somebody else comes along and tries to reuse them. So rather than putting in a lot of motels, whatever you're going to put in under hospitality, I like the fact that you recommended that you do this in phases, and you recommended starting with the Washington Hollow region. And the reason for that is because you already have the comprehensive, the Cottonwood Inn in place and the motel. They're historic. They've been there a long time. I remember as a young person eating in the restaurant that was in the Cottonwood Inn. Way before all these changes, there was a very nice old-fashioned restaurant there with wooden floors. The buildings are still there. So why not make use of those if you're going to try out hospitality? I think it's a good location because it's right near the parkway. It's near Pleasant Valley. It will be large enough to take care of most of the needs that people are expressing they need. And if that works out well, then look a little further. Where would you go next and so on? But I don't think you should be rushing into a lot of hospitality at once, because there's this danger of this failing, and then you've got all these buildings there, and then you also are going against the comprehensive plan, which wants a rural community, aesthetics and so on, and people are summing up again, are very happy with the way it is right now. So my recommendation is to go very slowly with it. I agree with what you said, and by the way, I think as a set of consultants, I'm very impressed with all the amount of work that you put in on this. It was very thoroughly done. I've seen others that are not done as well. So I've got 2 pages of what I wrote. But this one's already on the website. If you could find it, it's hard to find. And this one is from you, where you basically have said, I recommend the town implement those overlays in a phased approach, first starting with Washington Hollow. To me, those are the 2 important things that I saw in your recommendations among others. I think it will serve the town well over the long term. If things work out well, then you go ahead. If things don't work out well, then you didn't make any major mistakes. It's going to be hurting the community in the long run. And it's basically about the long run that I think most of us are concerned about.
Okay, thank you. I want to try to stick to the 7 o'clock, so I'll take one more.
Tracy, and I've always been a little bit concerned about the water issues. That was one of my biggest focus. And in particular where there's aquifers, and Abbotsville obviously was a hot topic. This summer has really driven home to me is I live on Deep Hollow Road. My lawn is always green. I have big shade trees. I'm brown. It's completely
Sure.
brown.
Yep.
And there have been moments where I'm like, okay, I'm just going to water this one little patch outside of my dining room so I can see a little bit of green. If you're running an inn or a hotel, you're fully irrigated, guests do not come to look at brown grass. We're gonna have, I'm afraid, I hope I'm wrong, but we're gonna have more summers. Every summer seems to be more of this and worse. We have to be cognizant of where an inn goes in, what kind of landscaping they're gonna put around it, and when you're coming up with the zoning, what kind of limits on irrigation we're gonna put on them. Because they will suck our aquifers dry, not only for flushing toilets and showers and swimming pools and whatnot, but also to keep the landscape beautiful, which is what you expect when you go to a nice hotel or a nice inn. You do not expect to see brown grass. Whereas people in homes will let the grass turn brown. So I think this summer has been a really good reminder, a big underscore of my concern with respect to any kind of hospitality in a rural setting.
Thank you. Okay. One more.
Just one question. You know, we've all talked about Cottonwood and expansion there and so forth. And everybody seems to think that that's the best place for it, which I do also. However, we've been talking all night about 20 rooms. Cottonwood, if they expand, you're going to be way over your 20 rooms. You got 20 or so right now. If they expand on the other side, you may have 40. How does that fit with everything we're doing?
This gets back to the notion of some of the flexibility that we were trying to put in our recommendations, okay? And the idea that in an area like Washington Hollow, you might be able to have a little bit more density, and as you move east and north, maybe you should have a little less, density of rooms and keys and things like that, right? So, and the idea that if you started with, say, 20 rooms as your definition in a place like Washington Hollow, maybe that's a little bit more, maybe that's, call it 30 rooms, all right? Maybe you also have the ability to do a bonus if you make it a Leeds building or something like that, and that gets you to 35 rooms or something like that. That was the kind of thinking that we had in mind.
So you're open for it.
Yeah, but I think the point though is that we were not thinking that you were going to end up at 2x that number or 3x that number. It had to be in that zone, or else you would then be going beyond what the community was saying to us. Okay, that was the point.
And I think that the whole notion of a density bonus, which really could be called like, a number of room increase bonus, whatever you want. It's not density of houses, but the number of rooms. That's really, I think, a great idea, because it's tied to providing some amenity that is desired by the town. So it's not like the developer is just getting all of the ability to grow, but the community is getting something in return, whether it be Leeds building or, recreation opportunities or some other, the incentive is basically you're giving a higher density in return for something that's of value to the town. And I think that I'm a real believer in density incentives as a way to find that balance.
It is two separate parcels, so it could be 20 over here, 20 over there.
Yeah, that was not lost on us, but it was not our, obviously we weren't really tasked, and we tried not to think about specific situations. Okay.
I think what, now that we're ending the meeting, I think what this whole process has been is to develop a rule book. They're giving us recommendations for rules. We now have to incorporate them somehow, either as an appendix or actual into the documents themselves. Once those rules are adopted, any applicant that wants to do something in the zones that are determined is still going to have to go through planning board. They're still going to have to go through the zoning board. There will be public hearings that will occur on each applicant's request to do certain things. If I'm an entrepreneur looking to come into a community to do an inn, and there's already 4 inns in the town, I'm not going to go to that town unless I can prove to myself through my analysis that there's enough need for another inn. So I think
the market, the capital market will start to adjust all of that. But I think right now, we just don't have the rules. What this committee has done expertly is to give us the blueprint and the rules. We need to now adopt those. And we need help to do that. And I think that's what we'll start addressing in our next board meeting.
And I would just follow up and just say that everyone in this room or on Zoom will have an opportunity, as I think you mentioned, Dan, there'll be another public hearing on this topic if we begin to go through the recommendations. So we have a
Yeah.
roadmap from there on sort of next steps
Yeah.
that how you can take this and then translate it into.
Yeah, you're required to have a public hearing for any comprehensive plan or zoning change. So it's, yeah.
Absolutely.
This was excellent.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
everybody.
Cheers. Okay.
Really appreciate it.
Yep.
This was Howard's, yeah, thank you guys, okay?